Hey, everybody. This is Maxine Taylor with another edition of Movers and Shakers. And my guest today is truly a mover and shaker. I have interviewed her on my radio show. I've interviewed her on YouTube videos, and many of you already know Melissa Joy Jonsson. If you've taken any Matrix Energetics seminars, you know that she co-teaches with Dr. Richard Bartlett. You've seen her for years. You know how wise she is, how brilliant she is, and I'm thrilled to have her on my show today because she's got a new book. And you know her books are powerful if you have any of her books. Her latest book is called The Little Book of Big Potentials. This is an understatement. The Little Book of Big Potentials. Melissa Joy Jonsson wrote The Little Book of Big Potentials. I'm going to hold it up so you can see it good. This is a culmination of her unique, expansive work integrating scientific principles and spiritual concepts into practical daily experiences. And you know how we want to bring the macrocosm to the microcosm. And believe me, once she starts talking, you'll see what I'm talking about. She really delivers. It offers a complete system of relating, assimilating, and embodying empowered, joy-filled, extraordinary living. You know, I think when you get this book, you can read all about her on the back. I'm going to turn the show over to Melissa Joy Jonsson now because she has so much beautiful stuff to share. Melissa, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Well, thank you, Maxine, for the beautiful introduction, and it's always a pleasure to be in the conversation with you. This is one of my favorite conversations to be in. I call it Conversations in Consciousness, and it's a privilege and an honor to share the information that's available in Little Book of Big Potentials, as well as the Joy teachings with all of your viewers and listeners worldwide. So thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Now, first of all, when I got this book, it blew me away. I would love you to, and I would love you to explain to everybody why you wrote this book. What was it that drove you to write this incredible book?
Well, thank you very much. There's probably numerous reasons for the why of the book. The primary reason is I fully believe in the value of information dissemination. He or she who has access to the most information truly has access to the power of choice. And so by virtue of sharing the information that is delivered in Little Book of Big Potentials, the 24 fields of flow, fulfillment, abundance, and joy in everyday life, means that anyone, anywhere, at any time has access to the power of commanding field flow and has access to this information that is based essentially on core universal truths. There's so much going on in our planet right now, and there's so much of a focus on fear and destruction and separation and disempowerment. And ultimately, I wanted to put this information out in a format that is easy to digest, easy to assimilate and embody, so that anyone, anywhere could come in contact with the information and truly feel empowered to transform not only their lives, but our shared collective reality. So the book itself is essentially a journey into the field of the heart, which is key to interactive reality creation. But more importantly, the book offers the readers an understanding of field flow and how the universe essentially organizes itself through informational fields. And when we understand how the universe functions and how co-creative reality essentially unfolds, then we are empowered to change up the way that we relate, and create with reality so that things don't appear to just happen to us. We are empowered to transform the experiences individually and collectively.
Wow. And this book really does deliver on that. And I know that one of the things that you have worked so hard to do is to encourage people to be their true, authentic selves. And please address that. This is vitally important nowadays.
Well, thank you very much. And the true authentic self it's a key MJOY teaching. And ultimately what it provides anyone the opportunity to step into is integrity with our core essence and the truth of who we really are. What's beautiful about the construct of the true authentic self is that it actually differs from what many people associate with the true self, and it also differs from the authentic self in that it is an integration of the true self and the authentic self. Now, what is the true self? The true self is the truth of everybody's core essence as unconditional love and limitless potential. Now, from a certain standpoint, that is a little bit outside of our reach down here in three-dimensional reality, where we appear to be experiencing all sorts of limitations. It's one thing to be told we're limitless potential. It's another thing to be able to practically apply that principle to everyday life.
Yes.
The true self as our limitless potential, integrated with our authentic self, the part of ourselves that appears to be experiencing limitation. We appear to be experiencing an inability to access that limitless self. That's the authentic self. And the integration of the true self with the authentic self is the recognition that, yes, we are limitless beings and we are having experiences that feel like limitation, but all limitations are still inherently, fundamentally connected to that limitless potential. When we integrate and embody both as the totality of our essence, then there is a freedom and a flexibility to be exactly who we are, perfectly imperfect in this moment, becoming more aware of who we are not so that we can step into more of our limitless potential, not by trying to shunt or negate our so-called perceived limitations, but by embracing them as a platform and a springboard that can serve as a trajectory for new momentum, new distinctions, and new expansions for our own experience as extraordinary beings. So our limitations are not something that we need to overcome or that we need to be ashamed of. They're actually something that we can embrace as a pattern of information or as a placeholder in our awareness that is there to reflect back some aspect of ourselves that we've not yet realized, recognized, embraced, and integrated. So the true authentic self is freedom to be who we truly are. And when we embrace integrity not as something that we need to aspire to, but something that is inherently within us, then we access our own inner coherence, or our coherency, or the coherency of infinite potential. And then we're able to align our awareness congruently based on that coherency. And that provides a formula for integrity in action.
So exciting. So exciting, because when you think about it, we all have this potential, and this marvelous little book helps us access it. Now, when I say marvelous little book, I say that because it's called a little book. There is not one extraneous word in this book. This book has to be read. It has to be, you want to do the backstroke in it. This is an incredible book. Melissa, let me ask you, on the part of our audience, if you would be so kind as to talk about these fields. There are 24 fields. Will you elaborate on what the fields are, and when you've finished, how we use this book and those fields to be our highest and best?
Absolutely. And with respect to the title, Little Book of Big Potentials, it's kind of funny because the book started off as a little book and it just kept growing and growing and growing. And guidance kept delivering more and saying, put more nutrition on the table. And so ultimately the book has become like a buffet. And so we've all had the experience of going to a buffet. We know what happens if we try to eat everything that's on the buffet. Even though it's all delicious, we might actually get overly full. And so the book can be read in a myriad of ways. You can read it cover to cover and fill yourself with all of the information over a series of several sittings, or in a singular sitting, because there are many readers around the world who have read this cover to cover. They could not put the book down. Many other readers like to just open the book so-called randomly, and there's no such thing as a random opening of this book, because the book has a consciousness, and it is hologrammed, and it will speak to you exactly where you are in your experience of your personal perspective reality. So there's many, many ways that readers can enjoy the book and derive tremendous benefit from the book and the fields that are encoded within the book, without necessarily having a linear experience of reading from chapter 1 to chapter 11. What is shared in the book are a series of teachings that have downloaded. Actually, as I look back, they started downloading when I was 5 years old. But the format and the completion of the conversation between the fields really came in over a series of geometrical downloads in the last couple years. And I've been sharing this work in a live experiential seminar through the MJoy seminars around the world. And as I shared with you earlier, I wanted to put this in a written format so that anyone could have access to the information even if they didn't have the ability to attend a seminar. What is shared in the book are 24 fields of flow, fulfillment, abundance, and joy. Now, those are descriptions to describe what are essentially holographic fields of love. These are informational fields. Essentially, they are non-local containers of information that follow the mathematics of love. They actually follow the ratio of the Fibonacci sequence. And I outline the scientific components of these fields of information and explain to the reader why these fields are sustainable, why they will provide for clarity and access to limitless potential as abundant love. The science is presented to the readers so that they can have an intellectual understanding of the power of connecting to the information. Now, with all that being said, understanding the science is not at all necessary in order to establish a connection to these fields. It's kind of like knowing the ingredients of the food on the table that you're eating. However, you don't need to know the ingredients in order to derive benefit from the buffet that is available. All you have to do is open your mouth and be willing to engage in the process of eating. All you have to do to connect to these fields is have desire and a curiosity and a willingness to open and make yourselves available to the information that is abundantly reflected in each individual field. These fields of love or fields of grace in action can be activated by simply intending to connect. I explain field resonance and signal transmission from a scientific standpoint so that people understand that the same instantaneous communication that is going on with respect to these fields is the same science that is being utilized to explain action at a distance, instantaneous healing, free energy. It is the same science as the science that Nikola Tesla was using to do some pretty crazy, outrageous, and powerful transformations of consciousness on the planet. This is the science of connection. Ultimately, there may be many listeners or viewers on this show who have had the experience of just knowing when their children needed them and they called their child at that exact moment. That is signal transmission that occurs at a non-local informational level. We are all inherently connected. We are all telepathic. We are all clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, but we have dummied down our awareness to resonate with limiting filters that put those experiences outside of our frame of reference and our accessibility. Little Book of Big Potentials leverages the same technology that is the same technology of connection, of limitless potential and free energy, and brings it down to the reader in a very easy to understand manner. So the 24 fields of flow, fulfillment, abundance, and joy allow for the readers to connect to non-local fields of information, containers, that when we connect to them or resonate with them, increases the likelihood that those experiences will be reflected in our personal perspective reality, in what I call our love hologram, because they utilize the physics of symmetry. So we intend to connect, let's say, to field 106, which is a field of flow and abundance. Then we are now resonating in a field of informational templates that increase the likelihood that abundance will play out in our love hologram. So an intent to connect is sufficient to activate a corresponding field flow. Now, what's really beautiful about the book is that it's teaching the reader how to command field flow. Ultimately, this means connection to any field of information in universal consciousness, not just the 24 fields that are shared in Little Book of Big Potentials. But when you learn how to command field flow, you are learning to activate the same physics that universal consciousness is utilizing to create and relate to everything. So embedded and enfolded within the book is really how to create any experience in your love hologram, but also in our shared love hologram. The experiences that I've been hearing from readers around the world have been humbling and mind-boggling and so delightful, because I wasn't sure whether I would be able to articulate the experience of the fields that are shared in the live in-person seminar in a book format. I held that intention, and I'm very good with utilizing language as a carrier wave for information. But I really wasn't sure when I put the book out whether the experience was going to translate from the spoken word to the written word. And I've heard from readers all around the world who have never even heard me teach that their lives are transforming simply by having this book in their field. Some people don't even read the book when they get it. They just stick it under their pillow and they sleep on the information. And they absorb the information that's hologrammed throughout the book in their field while they sleep. They have amazing dreams, and they wake up feeling delighted and excited to be awake. They change the way that they relate to their circumstances, to their problems, to their so-called limitations, simply by being in connection to or resonance with this book. Specifically, I've heard from readers who have bought their very first homes. I've heard several examples of people who have bought property, qualified for a mortgage beyond their expectations just by playing in fields 104, 105, and 106, which are all about manifestation, creation, and actualization. Many readers have shared sheer delight by virtue of just connecting to the very first field, field 101, which is the heart of it all. That is connection to heart-centered awareness and being in the field of the heart, which contains key codes for accessing our limitless self and our individual and shared life purposes. So many readers have said, once I started playing in field 101, everything around me changed. There are fields for relating to time differently. There are fields for being playful. There are fields for accessing our individual life purpose. There's even a field for intergalactic coherence, connecting to all beings that comprise our universal hologram beyond just planet Earth, and a reconnect of all as one and one as all. Now, why these fields are so timely is that when we look around at what appears to be happening, when we turn on the news, there is this fear, right? There's even a movement of conspiracy theories, an attempt to get the truth out. But the movement of conspiracy theories has an underlying or an undertone of division where there's still an us versus them. And what these fields offer us the ability to do is to make a powerful distinction that awareness of information is not necessarily resonance, and that awareness of information is a free-flowing movement of consciousness, and that resonance is the power of choice. So we learn the power to choose where we're going to resonate. Not from the standpoint of putting our heads in the sand and ignoring what appears to be happening in our world, and ignoring tragedies, and ignoring global wars. That's not useful for integrating in three-dimensional reality. But powerful distinctions are made between being aware of what's happening and then choosing where we will individually and collectively resonate so that we can affect what appears to be happening without further segregating ourselves into more division. Because a house divided cannot stand. And ultimately, unity consciousness, which is a facet of heart-centered awareness, is only available when we understand that it is all for one and one for all. And there are different resonances or different layers or densities of consciousness that are the focal point for much of the collective consciousness, but we have the power to change where we focus. We have the power to resonate in love, as love, within these divisive tragedies. And that creates a ripple effect that emanates out and begins to help people see more clearly the truth of who they really are.
And that's a very powerful piece of information that you've shared, particularly with what's going on today in our world. We feel powerless, we feel victimized, we feel helpless. And this beautiful little book, which I just adore, the little book of big potentials, I can see this totally changing our planet because of the 24 fields that you share. If people, let's face it, if we all came from love, we would, number one, ascend. Number two, we would not be creating these situations. We are the creators. And if we create it one way, we can change it and create it another. And you have given us a wonderful way of doing this. Let me ask you this. When somebody, you mentioned earlier that you can read the book linearly. You can start from page 1, which I did, and work your way through it till the end, which I did. There's a structure that I followed, because when I interview somebody, I want to make sure I get the full essence of what they're sharing with the world. And what you had said that I thought was so great is that you can pick it up anywhere. And with your own intention, move into the vibratory field that you're reading. Open yourself up to it and create magnificently. Am I getting that correctly?
You are getting that correctly. And each chapter ends with something I call practical play, which is the experience for the reader of connecting to the fields. So even if you haven't read the foundational principles relative to the science in the first 2 chapters, you can open it to chapter 7, and there is a practical play that will walk you through your own way of connecting to the field that you've just read about. So there's many, many, many different ways to experience the fields that are shared. And what's interesting is some readers don't even engage in the practical play, even though they love it. They find that as they're reading the book, they're actually changing, because words are cups of light. Words are carrier waves for information as transformation. Information as infinite formation, that is what we are able to access through these fields, is infinite formation as potentiality expressing through us as energy and experience. So you don't need any education to experience the book. And in fact, experience is a form of understanding.
Well, I don't have to tell you my favorite field because you've already mentioned it. It's field 124, planetary balance and unity. And as you know, I'm very involved in being an intermediary between us and our celestial, our cosmic brethren. Will you please elaborate on that field, and then any other field that you feel would be helpful to people who are watching this show right now? If you would just be led, that would be awesome, Melissa.
I would be honored. And just to share with the readers and the listeners that the fields move in a series of harmonics. They actually, technically there's 24 fields. However, they are exponential in their potential, and there is a dynamic and a relationship between the numbers. There's actually a gematria of the numbers, so that even though there's essentially 24 fields, there's really 24 to the 333rd power, because each one of the fields is holonomically tessered with all of the other fields. So there's really more than 24 fields, but for our mind to comprehend from a structural standpoint, it's really easy to say that there's 24. They move in a series of octaves. There's 3 octaves that formulate harmonics, and they also move in cycles of 3. So 101, 102, 103 have a focal point. 104, 105, 106 focuses, say, on manifestation. 7, 8, and 9 focuses on clear access to joy, and so forth. So they move with certain tendencies, but none of their tendencies are mutually exclusive. What that means is that holographically, field 124 contains all of the information that's inherent in all of the other fields. But there are tendencies or overtones of each field that are more pronounced. It's almost like personalities. Like holographically, you and I are the same. However, we're individuals with distinct tendencies that are expressed and known as our personalities. Our personalities are not who we are, but they are expressions that are more likely to actualize when we are resonating with you, so to speak. So field 124 is the culmination of all of the other fields combined. We move from self in relation to self in some of the earlier fields, to self in relation to others, interpersonal relationships, as well as relating and creating in work and social structures. And then as we move toward field 124, we've moved from individual, personal, and relational to global and intergalactic. And so this takes all of the holographic principles of as above, so below, as within, so without, and it moves it at a holofractal level to anything and everything that comprises our multiverse. Now, whether we're talking about sentient beings that are non-human, or we are just talking about general life forms, it really doesn't matter, because what one would consider to be an alien, another would say, well, that's just alien to my consciousness. I don't have a reference for that foreign state. What this provides for is connection and coherence with the unified heartbeat of life itself. Field 124 is a connection between the sun, which is like the heartbeat of the multiverse, with the field of our heart, which is the sun of our universe. And it connects into a crystal in the center of the planet, and then it beams out and connects up with all of the crystalline structures that make up not just planet Earth, but all planetary life. The effects of 124 are very, very pronounced in that it moves our perspective as individuals and a collective community from focusing on a world that is on the brink of destruction to a focus of the planet and the galaxies as their true authentic self and as a state of immaculate perception. So in other words, seeing the planet and the galaxies in their own inherent perfection, focusing on that as it is already available, increases the likelihood that that will be projected and reflected holographically in our experience of our personal and shared realities. And so this is a really, really important distinction for the readers in coming into contact with Field 124. As long as we are focusing on global destruction and the world's coming to an end, then we are actually projecting that holographically into the collective consciousness, increasing the likelihood that that will actualize and unfold as an expressed experience. When we move our awareness to focusing, connecting, projecting, and reflecting on the planet and the galaxies as perfection, in a state of coherency and flow, then that becomes a torsion field, a projection that is embedded in the fabric of the collective consciousness and increases the likelihood that that will actualize and unfold and be reflected in our everyday experiences. Now, I am not condoning putting our heads in the sand and saying we don't have to speak up against GMOs. We don't have to speak up against war. However, when we're speaking up against GMOs and we're speaking up against war, we are still in a space of duality. We are still going up against the very thing we want to change, and we are actually amplifying and empowering that field to become stronger. What 124 supports us in doing and embodying is a connection to coherence, where all possibilities become available, and then seeing the world the way that we know she or he can be as the it, they, seeing the planets as being in a cohesive conversation in a state of flow and grace. And then that becomes more likely to actualize in our shared love holograms. This field is really about connection, connection, connection. It is our disconnection and our alienation away from that truth that everything is interconnected, and realizing that the way that we see the world has an influence on the way the world is reflected. And 124 supports us in that connection, projection, and reflection, so that we can experience not a world that is coming to an end, but a world that is sustainable. To me, divine means sustainable, and sustainability is available to all of us from the field of the heart, as well as when we connect to Field 124.
Oh, beautiful. You know, the book is fabulous, and when you explain it, it comes alive. There's nothing like hearing it from the author, because you add so much to it. And I know that you've just done a workshop this weekend. Would you share some of the stories that people at the workshop have shared with you? I think they would be incredibly inspiring to our audience.
I would be honored. The workshop MJoy Integrative was just held recently in San Diego, and I'll be offering a series of additional workshops very soon. So I would invite the readers and listeners to visit my website for more information. Here's the plug: www.mjoyheartfield.com. That's spelled MJoyHeartfield.com, and new information posts regularly. But the seminar experience this past weekend was quite powerful. Even myself, I was humbly surprised, because the integration that occurred for all of the students, men and women, happened so quickly. It was like we were already there before the fields were even taught. And so there's something to be said about an intention to connect, not just to the book, but to the information encoded within the book, within the MJoy fields, because it's instantaneous. That torsion field signal transmission and reception happens instantly. It's so quick that it's done before you have begun. So What listeners would probably want to know is how incredibly practical these fields are. They're not some esoteric concept that is beyond our reach. They are very, very grounded in three-dimensional reality, even though they are very multidimensional in their core essence and their nature, in the same way that we are. We can be both. We can be very present, focused, and integrated in three-dimensional reality, all the while remaining acutely aware of our multidimensional nature. That's the beauty of being our true authentic selves, is that we get to have the experience of both. And spirituality doesn't need to be something that is compartmentalized away from our everyday experience. Spirituality is practicality. I remember one of the first comments that was shared early on in the seminar from a woman, because I asked everyone, why are you here and what do you hope to get out of this experience? Because we're shaping the seminar live and based on the individual consciousness that have come together. It's a co-creative process. And so one woman raised her hand and she said, well, you know, I read the book and I've been just kind of playing with the fields with my clients, and their entire lives are changing in really positive, expansive, integrated ways, and they don't know anything about the fields. However, I'm embodying the fields after reading the book, and then these fields become available to anyone and everyone that comes in contact with me. So I'm here to understand the mechanics. I want to understand the science. How is this possible? I want to have an intellectual understanding of what I'm already experienced and what all of my clients are already experienced. There were a number of men who found themselves resonating with some of the fields that tend to have more of the sacred feminine overtones. Now, I explain in the book, as well as in the AmJoy seminar experience, that sacred feminine is not gender specific. In fact, the sacred feminine is a description to describe the movement or the spiraling of the torsion fields that hold information. There's this emergence of the sacred feminine that's happening in the collective consciousness. And to me, the emergence of the sacred feminine has nothing to do with being female. The emergence of the sacred feminine is a return to our recognition and a remembering of our own inherent completion and the integration that we are all both sacred feminine and sacred masculine, and that neither are sacred nor exclusively masculine or feminine. It is inclusion as completion. And so there are a few fields that particularly have more of an inward spin, a spiraling that is negentropic from a scientific standpoint, as well as a communal outreach that occurs that have been described as sacred feminine tendencies. Well, these fields of self-love and self-nurturing and inclusion and completion are fractal game changers when we're talking about political structures, or we're talking about surrogate power structures like certain corporate hierarchies that seek to disempower the individual under the premise of all for one and one for all, but it's really all about the structure that isn't supporting us. And some of the men really found great solace in resonating with those fields where there was a nurturing component to help them access true authentic power, because true authentic power is not power over anything or anyone. It's an inner dominion of inclusion where all power is equally distributed amongst all, not from a communistic standpoint, but from an inner coherence that then allows for everyone to occupy their own unique space in consciousness and to express their true authentic individuality as an extension of community, not separate from, but as an extension with. And so many of the men were finding that, particularly field 115, I call it the mother lode. It's mother matters, but it's connecting to the sacred feminine in all matters. Matter means mother in certain interpretations. And so it's not just looking at our personal relationship with our mother, but it's mother nurturing, and it's recognizing that as conscious co-creators, we are all mothers regardless of our gender. We are all creating and giving birth to new experiences every single day and every single moment. And when we are giving birth from a space of self-love and self-appreciation and self-nurturing, then more appreciation, love, and nurturing becomes available for all that we create and all that we relate to, including our interpersonal relationships. So that was a really powerful experience to witness the men engaging in these sacred feminine fields, as well as watching the women engage in the fields that tend to have more sacred masculine overtones. Seeing them really step into their true authentic power, their true authentic expression, speaking their truths, being able to take action and to do from the heart space, which is a space of being, was a really beautiful, beautiful orchestration of these fields of grace in action.
Wow. Wow. Well, that's very encouraging and inspiring. I'm thinking of a person, I have a person in mind now who is very left-brained, very practical, very logical. If he can't touch it, if he can't feel it, if he can't see it, it is not in existence. And while he has opened up and is open more and more to the type of thought that you described so beautifully here. It's more than thought when he's opening up to the truth. How would you suggest to the person who is very pragmatic and very practical use the book, or did you have an experience of that this past weekend?
Absolutely. Because I love knowledge and I love information and I love the mind. To me, it's heart-mind synthesis, which is access to limitless potential with the power of choice. And so I tend to attract students who are very intellectual and really want to understand something in order to experience it. So what I would say to the person that you have in mind, as well as to anyone who's listening, is honor that, acknowledge that that's the way that you currently relate to your universe and to your reality, and that that's how you like to structure information. And with that, I would dive into chapter 1, chapter 2, and a little to a lesser extent, chapter 3. But chapter 1 and chapter 2 is the organizational structure, the science. Science is a map to describe terrains of consciousness, to describe the innate workability of reality. And therefore, if you need logic, there is tons of logic in the book. I love logic. Logic can only carry us so far. I would also invite this particular person and all of our listeners and our readers to connect to Field 105, because 105 is a field of intuition. It's a field of listening. It's a field of accessing knowing without knowing how we know. It's a knowing without some tangible information to confirm and tactilely say this is real. There is an inner knowing that we all have access to that is available through the field of the heart that transcends and supersedes the limitations and the fragmentations of logic. And so I would say honor that you love logic and invite intuition. We want to synthesize intuition with logic. We want to synthesize the limitless potential that is available through the science of heart-centered awareness with the power of choice, with discernment, which is the power of the mind and the intellect. Together, the field of the heart and the mind provides for access to all with a laser-like focus that essentially makes us unstoppable. So honor the way that you relate to the world and realize there are additional ways that you can relate and create that will allow for an inner sense of completion that gives us access to absolutely anything and everything.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that. Now, my clients and everyone I talk with is interested, seems like, in more love of a personal, on a personal level, and very pragmatically, more money. Here we are in third dimensional earth plane living. How would you, using these wonderful fields, how would you address that? Now, those are two separate concepts, but they are both ruled by the planet Venus, love and money and beauty, etc. So I'm sure that you have had questions on these subjects in your workshops. Take it away, Melissa.
Well, I've never had the question exactly that way because you're unique in the way that you assimilate information and express. So thanks for honoring that and bringing it forward in that particular angle. What I will share is that I don't think that those categories are as separate as we think they are, and that part of what we experience as limitation is based on how we segregate and we compartmentalize the various aspects of our experience of reality. So I would say that love, interpersonal love, relational love, and money are both facets of the same diamond of abundance, and abundance is the currency of love. And so what I would first say is take a look at what money means to you. A lot of times we want money without paying attention to what is motivating, what is the catalyst for getting money? Because money itself is simply a placeholder. And as long as we're resonating in fields of lack or even fields of economic indicators put forth by news and newspapers, then we will continually experience lack of money in our love hologram. Love, abundance, money, all currencies of infinite potential. When we change up the fields of information that we are in resonance with or connecting to, there's a physics and an unfolding that naturally occurs. So from a personal standpoint, I would say to all of our listeners and readers, pay attention to why you want money. What are the individual means or programs that you're running in your own hologram that are connecting you up to larger, more disempowering fields of information? If you're running an individual mimetic program that says, I can't do what I love and make money, then you have now segregated out love and money into a double negative that's going to cancel out your ability to attract abundance and be in a job that you love. All 24 of these fields are fields of love. They all reflect the mathematics and the symmetry of 1.618, which is love's formula for creation. That is an abundant formula. When we resonate in fields of abundance, then one of the aspects that unfolds is actually more money. However, what's important as an individual is to not come at abundance from a space of lack, because that will create and reflect more lack in our fields. But coming at abundance of money from a space of love, love as abundance, recognizing that money itself is neutral, it's simply a placeholder, it's simply a tool of information exchange. And releasing all the charges that we may have for or against money, because there's all sorts of associative memes and larger morphic fields that tell us, like, you know, well, money's greedy, or you can't be spiritual and have money, or, you know, my grandfather had to walk 22 miles in the snow barefoot to get to school, and so our entire family has a consciousness of poverty that I can't seem to overcome. You can overcome that. You can learn how to command field flow, change up your resonance, change up the mimetic programs you're running that are signaling these larger morphic fields, connect to fields of abundance, and abundance will flow in all categories of your love hologram, whether we're talking about financial abundance or an abundance of interpersonal love or just an abundance of free time and playfulness. And the last thing that I would add for our readers and our listeners and our viewers is that A state of abundance is characterized by appreciation. So cultivating a sense of appreciation for what is already abundant in your life will send signals to fields of abundance to reflect back more accordingly. So starting with what you already have, not from a sense of lack, but from a space of grace and appreciation, will send signals out to the universe to bring more of that appreciation to you, no matter what field flow you choose to connect to. Appreciation is the currency of infinite potential as abundance expressing itself in flow.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. When I think in terms of love, it has so many different expressions. And in your book, one of the things that you describe, you mentioned love is power. We have a few minutes left. I would love you to talk more about that and any more that you would like to share about love.
Well, I think I would like to share that from a scientific standpoint, love is the spinning or the spiraling of the torsion fields that serve as containers for sacred geometries that give rise to all form and matter in the universe. So love is consciousness spinning. A spiral is the most efficient movement of consciousness. And in order for consciousness to know and experience itself, it must do so through reflection. The spiral is how subsequent torsion fields are spun off to establish connection and reflection. So love is woven into the fabric of absolutely everything. Now, what I am talking about is essentially a transpersonal love. I am talking about the essence that is imbued in absolutely anything and everything that is universal consciousness. That is not personal to us from a standpoint of personal identification. It's love is love as love relates, and love elates in its own reflection. Whereas personal love is I, as a separate individual, love you as a separate individual, and we've created brackets of a relationship to engage and exchange information. So the love that I talk about is transpersonal in nature, and yet it is personal to all of us because that love is available through the field of the heart. That is what connects us into the eternal now and the eternal all that is, was, and ever may be. When that love expresses in relation to whatever it is we are connected to, aligning our awareness to, choosing to relate to, that love is as an unconditional love without conditions, expresses in relation to the conditions and the parameters that we are noticing and experiencing as we relate to one another. So there's very much a personal component woven throughout the book, because without our connection to the love that is, there is no vehicle for expression. So it's an impersonal, unifying love and grace that is the universe expressing and experiencing itself in a personal container called individuality, still inherently connected to community, that then has our unique personal perspectives and angles of awareness woven into it. So there's a deeply universal truth that then has personal qualifiers, including my own distinctions made over the last several decades, that make these fields very personal to all of us. And every individual that connects to the fields is also contributing information to the fields that then become available for others to resonate with too. So yes, love is all and love is everywhere. And there are distinctions that we can make as we relate to situations and circumstances that appear to be anything other than love, that appear to be far removed from love as its inherent recognition, and yet seeds of love are contained even amidst the greatest tragedies.
And you, those of you who have not yet gotten a copy of this wonderful little book of big potentials, you now have the greatest introduction to it you could have, the author. Melissa, thank you so much for being my guest today. As always, come back anytime. And those of you out there, join me again next time when once again I introduce you to another marvelous mover and shaker. And keep in mind that if you want to change your life, change your mind. So till next time, see you soon.
Thank you, Maxine.
You're welcome.